Okay, there we go. I have discovered the secret to making sure that I don't have multiple lives. I have to sign out and then sign back in because for some reason, when I stay signed in, that's when I have all the problems of it making the video private where no one can comment or anything. So let me delete this one. Okay, so that one's deleted, so that doesn't confuse people. I'm going to go ahead and share this. Hello, Esther. How are you? Are you ready for Christmas? Is everyone ready for Christmas? I, for the first time in like years, am almost completely ready. I do have to address to a few friends and my piano students. I need to do Christmas cards and get those out by tomorrow. So I'm cutting it close for that. But everything else, I am done. I've been wrapping the presents as they come in or as I buy them. And that makes a huge difference when you do that. And in it, I keep like all of my presents that I have for all of the kids. I'm multitasking right now. If I look distracted, I am. I keep all of my presents written down and what I spend on them so I can, try to keep it a little bit fair. Obviously, the younger kids get more presents overall than the older kids, because older kids, let's face it, they are more expensive. So what does Chloe like? Chloe, let's see. I don't know. All of my girls, they like fuzzy warm blankets. They like mittens and gloves. They like anything with coffee. Well, Chloe doesn't really like coffee so much, but she does like Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts drinks. Abigail, of course, likes anything music, even just ghosts or a snacky food. Chloe likes jewelry. Abigail does not. They're all quite different when it comes to that. So, all right. So that should give enough people to join, give enough time for people to join here. Okay. So today I actually got the idea when I went out with my husband to one of our favorite places, Maples, to eat. And there were some people there that don't come very often to church. We've tried to get them to come through the years, but they don't come very often. It's very sporadic. And they were asking a lot of questions to my husband, trying to see if he could solve a problem they were having with something that was going on in their life. And it just got me to thinking, sometimes there are no easy answers for hard things in life. And sometimes there are no easy solutions for years of problems. Because oftentimes in our ministry and in my ministry of doing GLS, my husband and I get asked very hard questions. People want us to offer an easy solution to a problem that's been building for years and years unchecked. We are almost expected to be experts, in everything, counseling, giving advice, magicians of sorts, if you will, solving problems in horrible situations with just some advice. It's next to impossible for some situations. And if and when we can't provide an answer or a solution, the anger is then taken out on us for not being enough or doing enough. But we aren't magicians. We can't fix those things that there are no cures for. So instead, I try to focus on telling younger moms to watch for things that have a potential to turn into the big things if left unchecked, and younger wives, just younger women in general. I've seen bitterness grow in homes and anger, and before you know it, the kids are walking away from every bit of Christianity. So I try to warn all of you to work on the little things before they become the big things and before they have no remedy. And Esther, I will not. It'll be our little secret. So Proverbs 29:1 says, and this is the verse that came to mind when these people were asking my husband for all this advice, and he just really didn't know quite what to tell them, because this verse fits the situation that they were telling us about. He that being often reproved hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. Many problems in life start with pride, and they end with not being able to fix faults in your own life. You can see this all throughout the Bible. As Christians, we should be willing to fix and adjust and grow, and also to be teachable and have a teachable spirit. None of us have arrived, and all of us have things to work on in our own lives. So let's talk about some of the things I've seen with a near impossible remedy or solution, or even one that's not going to be fixed with the snap of your fingers. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's not even going to be fixed sometimes in a year or 2 years. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take a lot of prayer, and it's going to take a lot of effort. And people just want an instant fix, right? We live in a generation that's instant gratification when it comes to everything. I want it now. I want it yesterday. I want this problem fixed. So that's the generation that we live in. But let's talk about first some things when it comes to child rearing. Many times we are approached with, can you please help us with usually a teenager? Okay. So by the time that a child, I won't even take parenting advice from anyone that has toddlers. Honestly, there's principles in place that you can learn from, but unless I can see that person's fruit, I'm not going to blindly follow their advice. So I will not take advice when it comes to certain, even just maybe things that they do in their own home, whether they be super high standards or different methodology that they go around as far as dating, relationships, whether or not they let them work in the world, whether or not they let them go to college, whatever that is. I'm not going to take advice from someone with toddlers. That's just not what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow the example of those who have raised godly children who have continued on in the path that they were taught. So that's who my husband and I listened to the most when we had younger kids. And it seems to be working great so far. So we're going to keep up that practice of doing that. Hello, Chanello. So when it comes to child rearing, most oftentimes we get presented with lots of issues that have been building for years and years and years. And if you have a rebellious teenager, it did not just start when they turned 13. That problem has been there, and it's been building since the time they were little. I'm seeing a big disconnect with Christian families and the children that they're raising. A lot of times the children, when they turn 18 and they now have to decide whether or not they're going to continue on in the standards that their parents preached about and taught about and all these things. And this is from, preachers' kids' homes. They just say, nope, and they walk away, or they do everything opposite of what their parents stood for. And so there's a disconnect somewhere, and it didn't just start in their teenage years. This starts way earlier. It starts when they're 6, 7, 8, 9. And if you don't nip it in the bud or recognize the problem and really identify the problem, then it has the potential to grow into a bigger problem. So training young does work. And I believe one of the disconnects that's happening is we're not getting our children's hearts. We're seeing them as more of a trophy or a prize at, look at all my great child rearing methods. They must work. It's more like a trophy thing to make us look better and make us look good, rather than really focusing on what our goal is and why do we want to raise godly children. For me, I truly believe in this life. I believe that being a Christian is the best life there is. I believe that being a Baptist holds the closest to any doctrine. I believe 100%, 110% in the Bible, and that God's words are true, and that God's ways are the best ways. And I think that Baptist lines up the most with that. So because of this, I want my kids to have the same thing, right? If I have a good life and I have a happy life and I have a blessed life, I want them to have the same thing. I don't want them to have the baggage that being in sin brings, and committing crimes and just living for the flesh. I don't want them to be in bondage to that. So I have to really start young when it comes to these principles. And I do start young when my kids are just beginning to learn to talk and just beginning to learn to walk. And I'm talking with them constantly. I'm communicating. Communication is so important. They're not just these other human beings living in our home. They're human beings with souls and spirit and minds of their own and emotions and all these things. And when we have little kids, we're creating core memories, right? It's just our adult life, but it's their childhood. So we're creating these core memories for them. And so we have to be mindful of that from the time that they're young. Teach them to obey and listen for the right reasons, but not to make you look good. I think with child rearing, showing them examples and expecting things of them. And this was one of the complaints that we hear a lot from teenage parents are like, well, my kid doesn't want to go to school. And we're like, okay, so what's the problem? Well, she won't go to school. Okay, you're the parent. And it starts with when they're 2 and they don't want to brush their teeth. Okay, you're the parent. You make that choice that, I'm sorry, you're going to brush your teeth. So you start establishing some things when they're young. And I see parents who let their toddlers rule the home, and whatever their toddler wants goes. They don't establish boundaries. They don't establish authority in the home. Why is it a surprise then when they're 16 and they're refusing to go to school? You never made them obey when they were young. So now they're not obeying when they're 16. So one of the things that we've told people with kids, maybe they're stealing from the store and I just can't stop them. They won't listen to me. They won't go to school. Well, is there such thing as truancy officers? If they will not listen to the authority in the home, then it might be time to bring in the big guns. No pun intended. It might be in time to bring in the authority that will enforce it with handcuffs and a gun. So, you are the authority of the home, and you have to establish that from the time that they're a young age. Expect things of them. I know with my children, I expect them to act a certain way. I expect them not to act another way. And if those expectations are met, then there is peace in the home. But if those expectations are not met, then we're going to have a discussion and we're going to have a talk and we're going to, try to get those things fixed. And you as the mom know your kid the best. You can see habits forming. You can see lazy tendencies. You can see character flaws, just as they know all your character flaws too. So it goes both ways for sure. Give them responsibility when they're young, because that will carry over into when they're older. If you let them sleep until noon and stay up till 1 a.m. playing video games, don't be surprised when your teenage son turns 18 and can't hold down a job and can't get up to his alarm clock. I am so very well pleased in my 2 older boys. My husband did a very good job, and a lot of this lies on the husband, and he did a very good job with our boys. It was very important to him that, especially with our sons, they be hard workers. Now, obviously, at me as the mom, it's very important to me that my girls are very hard workers as well, because being a mom, being married, running a home is not for the faint of heart. And so they need to be strong too. They need to be strong mentally. They need to be strong emotionally. They need to be strong even physically. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's really important to my husband and I. And so he has really focused, since the time that they were little, he really focused on raising hardworking boys. And he accomplished that. They're both very hardworking. In fact, Tommy is going to kill himself with all the overtime that he works, gets up at 2 a.m. every morning and works 12-hour days, like 5 days a week. He's crazy. But that's the type of son that my husband raised. That's the type of son I raised, So they're both hardworking men that show up when they should show up and are there and do what's expected of them. So give them responsibility. Even from the time that they're little, they can do something around the house. They can help you load the dishwasher. They can help you pick up. They can clean the bathroom, whatever it is. My kids are expected to pull their weight in their home, in our home. So acknowledging your shortcomings and getting better with your younger kids. Maybe you see an area, I could have done better on this with my older kids. So you acknowledge that and you strive to do better. I think, me included, we do a disservice to young moms. Let's say we've been teaching things for years. Okay. So I started this show when my son was 16. He's now 21, almost 22. So I've been doing it for going on 6 years in 2024. It'll be 6 years in 2024. So let's say that I turned out a son that was committing felonies, was holding up gas stations, was lazy, was a drug dealer, whatever the case is. Let's say that's what I turned out. Okay. My oldest son turned out that way. I need to readjust my teaching. And for me not to publicly say, I'm sorry, this method didn't work. I said to whip your teenagers with a whip when they didn't listen to you, and this is what I created. That's an extreme. Obviously, I've never done that. Obviously, I hope no one does that, but I'm just using an extreme to show you, readjust publicly. If I have a public platform, maybe I should publicly say, this was too harsh. I shouldn't have done it this way. I'm revamping the way I'm doing it because it had a very bad outcome. My son's facing prison time, whatever it is. And that's a huge extreme. It doesn't even need to be that extreme, but even if I'm raising children who decide to walk away from Christianity, who aren't pure until they get married, who decide that the world is better than living the Christian life. If I'm doing that, then I'm doing you all a disservice to not readjust my teaching when I might have someone that's just listening to every word I'm saying and soaking it up. And of course, there's always personal responsibility involved. But I might have someone that's like, I'm going to do these methods because, this is what I'm going to do these methods. And I hope no one wants a felon for a son. But, I'm going to do these methods. And so I'm just going to blindly say whatever Cassandra does. Well, first of all, you should never blindly say what I do. Second of all, I think all of us older women would do well to just be, and I say older, but I'm not even mid-40s, I'm almost halfway through 40s. It would do well to stay humble and just, if we need to readjust our methods, then we readjust our methods and not get so stuck in pride and being stubborn. Because honestly, I'm kind of over it. I'm kind of over pride and insecurity, and it's taking over the IFB world, and it's ruining relationships, and I'm over it. So I think if we would just all be a little bit more humble about things and say, I don't have all the answers, but I did produce a hardworking son, and this is what helped. Is he a little bit high strung? Yeah, he is, because I'm a little high strung, and he picked that up for me. But he's a hardworking son. He's a good provider. He's a good husband. I know someday he'll be a good dad. So, if something was major failing, then readjusting. If you don't teach your kids to respect authority when they're younger, they're not going to respect authority as they get older. And that includes police officers, the judge. And we're always going to have an authority in our life. Always. All of us are always going to have an authority in our life. We're never just solely our own person. We have speeding laws that we have to obey. We have, laws of the land that we have to obey. And if we do not obey those things, we will be thrown into jail. And that freedom, whatever freedom we had, will be taken away from us. So teach them to respect your authority. A lot of times in churches, the parents are just terrible about they nitpick everything the pastor does, and they have a problem with everything he preaches. And let's say they're mainly there just for the activities or the programs that the church has. And is it any surprise to you when you want your child to listen to something the preacher is saying, whether it comes to relationships or staying pure till they're married, or continuing on in the path of the Lord? Is it any surprise then when, after all the times that you've slammed the preacher and after all the times that you've slammed the preaching, that they're not going to listen? No, they're just following suit with what you have said or you have done. So that's what's going on there. Just remember that time is short and you only have 18 years. It's really not that long of a time. We only have them for probably a fifth of their life, if they live to be a long age. So don't take them to church. Don't not take them to church and then expect the pastor to solve all their problems in 2 weeks. This happens all the time to us. We ask people over and over, can you come to church? Because you're going to get a lot of preaching at church. We have Sunday school here. We have Sunday morning. We have Sunday night. We have Wednesday night. 4 different times, 4 different opportunities that you can come and you can get fed by the word of God. Can you come to church? And then they don't. And then they expect us in 2 weeks to solve all these problems that have been developing over years. And then when you're not able to, you're just the worst person ever, right? So if you want your kids to respect pastoral authority, to respect preaching, to listen to words of the Lord from the Bible and being taught and expounded, then get into church, be faithful to church, and don't have roast preacher, every Sunday after the after the sermon. So let's talk a little bit about teens, though. Some things that you have to keep an eye out because they can quickly turn into situations that don't have an easy fix. Number one is dating. Now, for us, we have a hard rule that you have to be over 18. That's just our rule in our home. But do not allow your children to date or go after someone unless they're allowed to get serious about it, because they will develop feelings very quickly and they will most likely rebel. And I've seen this over and over again. They will most likely rebel if you put a stop to it. If you just suddenly, you give them privileges and then you're just dialing back all those privileges because maybe you get a weird feeling about it. We've known of situations where that happened. There was no really good reason to say no to this relationship for their kids, and their kids were older. I'm talking like in their 20s. And it's been probably 2 decades since that happened, and they're still not married. And I think they probably would have most likely been happy together and made a good life. But because of just little things that annoyed them or, things that they weren't totally crazy about, it wasn't any big sin issue or anything. It was just a control thing, I think. And I think a lot of parents can get very controlling. And so don't allow or don't give the green light for a relationship. Give them privileges and then pull them back, because that will do a lot of damage. And just remember that who they marry is so important, because you can have a very beautiful girl, very pretty girl, but she's going to make your son's life miserable. So watch out for, red flags and give your advice. And now my rule of thumb is I am pretty hands off. Obviously, my kids want me to approve of who they're talking to, but I try not to meddle, because especially my adult kids, and most of them, if they're over 18 when they start this relationship, they're adults and they need to learn how to navigate relationships as well. So I like to be there as kind of the one that they can come to it for advice if they want it. The one that can point out what I'm seeing or not seeing, but I do try to not meddle very much with it. And we have not let them go forward with any relationship where we had issues. So we've always let them give them the okay. And then once we gave the okay, we did not take that okay back. That would do a lot of damage to them, because we've seen that happen in the past. With jobs, you have to be really careful with influences that are going to be in their lives, who their friends are, who they're around. I've heard a lot of parents say that they would never let their daughter get a job. I'm not totally 100% on board with that, because I do think, once again, it comes down to a lot of having their heart, and kids are going to sin if they want to sin. And it is about maybe being choosy about where they work, whether you might be okay with them in a daycare. I would not be okay with my girls in a food job, like fast food, waitressing. That's already been eliminated. My girls know that's not even an option. So I don't like the food industry. And part of that is based off of my own interactions when my sons were doing food industry jobs. So I developed that opinion because of things that they saw and things that they handled. I just had a feeling that this was going to, I had a feeling that this was going to go off when I was online today. Take it off. Sorry. I don't want someone to leave a message and it be on air. So I could see that happening. Be like, I'm calling to complain about Liberty Baptist Church people knocking on my door. There's a few of those on there right now. So that would have been kind of funny though. But yeah, I'm not totally out on my girls never having a job, but I'm just instead going to be rather picky about the type of job that they have. So What's another thing that is very hard to have a solution for or next to impossible when that comes up? And I want to say too, that all of these things that I'm talking about, if they have happened in your life, I don't want this to be like a hopeless discussion. Okay. I don't want you to be like, there's no hope for me. I'm never going to recover from this or whatever. I want this to be more of just a warning for those who are thinking about going down these different paths or thinking, the damage won't be that bad if I do this, because there's a lot of damage from these things. But if you have done it, or if it's in your past, you can get past it. It will take lots of work. It'll take lots of commitment and lots of prayer. You can work towards it, but it's going to be hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It will be extremely hard. So this next one is infidelity. And this will wreak havoc on a marriage. It sometimes takes years to build up to. It's a grievous wound and you can recover from it, but it forever leaves a scar. So if you have been the one who has been cheated on, you're always going to have the pain from that scar. Even after it's healed and you've learned to trust and you've moved on again, there's always going to be a little bit of remembrance there because of that. Infidelity is awful. It breaks up homes. It breaks up families. It's just, and a lot of times it starts with pornography. And if I could say anything to moms with boys, please warn your boys of the dangers of pornography. There are so many men addicted to this. In fact, I've read a startling study the other day. Was it 50% of even clergy are looking at pornography or involved in pornography? And pornography literally rewires your brain pathways. It rewires everything so that you react to your wife differently. You always have these images in your head, and just look up studies about what pornography does to the male brain, to anyone's brain too. Women are getting hooked on it as well. So just do studies, warn your boys, teach them about the importance of remaining pure, not only in body, but also in spirit and mind, and not looking at those things and no, getting married does not just take away that desire, because I've known married men who they literally have to watch it every single night. And their physical relationship with their wife is not what it should be, because they're wired so differently because of this pornography. So pornography has devastating effects that oftentimes leads to other sexual sins. If you cannot control yourself when it comes to watching things, then that shows that there's an evidence of lack of self-control in your life. It shows that you already struggle with that, and that that lack of self-control might be in other areas, such as looking at women that you're already looking at women that aren't your own wives. But it might lead to you literally being with other women that aren't your own wife. So I do think a lot of root of sexual sins is pornography. And one of the most famous serial killers, was it Ted Bundy, I believe, talked about how his problem started when he was a boy, and it started with pornography, and it changed his mind. And he knows that's where the root of that all came from. So I think one thing that leads to this too is elevating one gender over another. And you have to be careful with listening to over-the-top preachers and over-the-top women with platforms on social media, such as the transformed wife versus such as Michael Pearl. A lot of times those type of people are friends or go hand in hand because they're both so extreme and they're both so over the top. Well, I believe that with both of them, Lori Alexander and Michael Pearl both, they elevate one gender over another. Lori Alexander has the mindset that men are always right, men are always godly, men are always wonderful, women are scum. That's just what her tweets scream to me. I don't like her writing at all. I feel like she's almost, I don't know. She worships man almost to an extent. And I feel as if that is why men love her stuff, and they gobble up her stuff, and they just love her stuff because she clearly almost puts men on a pedestal, men as an idol. And I do think that you can get into that mindset where men are not all godly because they're men, and women are not all evil because they're women. And so you get into this MGTOW, mindset where you're red pill MGTOW, where all women are evil and there's no Western women and they're all floozies. And I personally take offense at that because I hear these MGTOW people all the time, there's no good women left. They're all, whores, and they're all sleeping around by the time they're 18 or 19. Well, I married pure, and my husband and I were both pure, and we've only ever been with each other our entire married life. And, I'm a Christian. I've not cheated on him. I've remained faithful to him. And so I take offense at these MGTOW types because it's not true. And I know I'm raising daughters that are pure. I'm going to stay pure until they're married too. And raising sons that are pure. I'm going to stay pure until they're married. So that's just a lie. Men are not all godly because they're men. Women are not all evil because they're women. Men don't just get a free pass for adultery because they're men. And women just don't need to just get over it. Adultery is devastating. It is devastating to the wife. It's devastating to the man. He's bringing a reproach upon himself, and it's devastating to the kids of that home. So sometimes there's not an easy answer for that. It's not as simple as just get over it. There's so much more that goes into it. And while I do think restoration should always be the goal, I do think that true repentance needs to be involved for that to happen. Because if there is a man who is just committing serial adultery over and over and over again, you're going to have to look at just the truth of that. He can be bringing home diseases. He can be putting her life into danger. He can be putting the kids' lives into danger. If there is ever abuse in the home, especially when it comes to physical abuse, the authorities need to get involved, and you need to throw his butt in jail, and you need to get out of there. Then you need to go to a safe place. So if there's ever physical abuse, that is my recommendation. You don't stay with that, and you don't try to work through that, because chances are you might be dead. Oftentimes when a wife or her kids are murdered, it is by the man. He's always the primary suspect in a case like that because family violence seems to be more prevalent than someone just breaking into your house and murdering you. Usually that's very rare when that happens. Most oftentimes when someone gets murdered, it's by someone that they knew, someone that loved them. I watch true crime all the time. I know what I'm talking about. Let's talk about some things that can damage our marriage to a point where there is no easy solution. And I think for us women, one of the things that we have to be really careful about is a critical spirit. If we are constantly down on our husbands, constantly down on our kids, constantly finding fault with everything they do, constantly nitpicking, constantly nagging, constantly unhappy, constantly freaking out, why in the world would they want that for their home after they've grown and left our home? Unresolved hurts with our husband. When the problems pop up, take care of them quickly. Don't let them fester. Don't let them build up to the point where they explode eventually. If you have constant fighting in your home, if your home is a war zone, if there is any abuse in marriage at all, this is not going to have an easy solution. Anytime someone crosses the line into territory where it should not exist in a Christian home, it shouldn't exist in any home, but physical violence is one of those. Whether it's you with your kids or whether it's your husband to you or your husband to the kids. Once that line is crossed, then you need to get the authorities involved. Because if they will not listen to the authority of God's word, they're going to need to listen to the authority that can keep you safe and protect you. One of the things in marriage that can really damage our marriage is elevating other people's spouses over your own. And so being friendlier with other men, talking to other men, spending one-on-one time with other men, or vice versa. him with ladies, treating other women with more respect than his own wife. Those things ought not be. Being self-centered and being unwilling to change. Years and years and years of this will go by, and you get to a point where you're both just embittered and mad at each other all the time. There is no love and forgiveness in your heart, and it gets to where you're just coexisting. And by then, this has been years and years and years and years of this. It's hard to offer a solution to something like that because there's just so many years to work through, and there's just so much bitterness and so much pain, and it's so much better to just get it nipped early, take care of that early when the problems start popping up, basically. So let's talk about friendships a little bit. Not letting friendships get to the point where there is no fixing them, or there's no solution, or there's just no going back and mending it, as this happens quite often. I just want to ask you first, how long have you had a close friend? What is the year length? Like, have you had a close friend since you were a kid? That's very rare. Now I have since I was 12. But I have other friends that I've been friends with for 15 years, 10 years, 5 years. It's not always everyone else's fault when friendships fail. And if you have a track record of, number one, never having a friend for years, just your friendships are all less than a year old, and then they fizzle and die. Another one less than a year old, they fizzle and die. Look inwardly to see if you're the problem and accept blame where blame is due. And this is hard for us to do because we want to blame everyone else, right? I look back at certain friendships and I honestly did nothing before the friendship dissolved, if I want to say it that, because I truly believe that if it's a true friendship, it's going to survive the winds of political storms. And I've been in a lot of political movements, and they've all crashed and burned. And those that became my friend when I was the in crowd, when I was on the in club, as soon as the wind shifted, they dumped me. And one day I just would wake up to a message telling me what a horrible person my husband was, and what a horrible person I was, and all these made up crazy things that they had been listening to in these secret groups. And that was it. I've been canceled for teaching piano when everything was going great. Their kids were learning great, and the political wind shifted. No more. I'm done with you because of who my husband was. And I'm seeing that too, even with my own children, because of who my husband and I are, and it all comes down to different eschatological views. My kids are being canceled too. So, yeah, but it's not always your fault. But then I've looked back at some friendships, and I take responsibility in the demise of those. Maybe I didn't do enough to try to hang on to that. Maybe I was too busy or preoccupied with other things, and I wasn't able to put the focus on that friendship that I needed to. So, but if all of your relationships fall apart, your relationships with your friendships, your relationship with your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your relationship with your spouse, if all of your relationships are falling apart, you are most likely the problem. There's a big problem there, and you should probably fix it or address it. Be careful to burn bridges. Friendships are super important to me. So unless there's a clear example of why I need to burn the bridge, I'm very careful in not burning the bridge. Being civil to other people is a good thing. Not making enemies is a good thing, if you can. Obviously, sometimes you're going to have enemies for certain beliefs that you hold, and that's no fault of your own. You're just standing on God's word, and you're not like divisive about it or a jerk about it. They're just going to choose not to associate with you because of that. That's different than just being a jerk about it, trying to be divisive, trying to cause problems, trying to get people mad at each other. So be careful to burn bridges. Remember that God brings into your life who you need at that time. And I've seen that throughout my life when I had a void from another friendship that deteriorated, whether that was due to that person dying and going on to heaven, or whether that was to a friend moving away, things out of my control. God has sent along someone that I needed right at that time. And then, there's different seasons. There's different friends that have helped me through different seasons in life. And then, I make it through and we both kind of go our separate ways. But then there's friends where I don't have to see or have to talk to them every day of every week. But when we do see each other, we pick up right where we left off. And those are great friends to have too. Just because you don't like someone doesn't mean that you have to recruit everyone else in the world to hate them too. Most people that are bad people are going to expose themselves eventually. They're going to bring about their own destruction and their own ruin. And you not dealing with it is showing a lot more faith than you trying to take matters into your own hands. So let me reiterate that just because you don't like someone doesn't mean you have to recruit everyone else in the world to hate them too. I've had women in the past that have turned on me, and I've been sent screenshots of they're in every group. Just anytime someone mentions me, they're writing paragraphs about how evil I am and how wicked I am. And they're going around and telling people that are friends with me all these horrible things, the horrible person that I am. So I don't understand the need to do that. Just disassociate yourself with someone and leave them alone. Move on with your life, right? Nobody got time for that. Be careful about gossip and what you share. And I'm going to say, preachers are sometimes the worst about this. I cannot believe how preachers get together and just completely demolish another preacher who's doing something that they don't like. 2 other preachers, yet they never call them and talk to them. And that's a shame. Only say behind someone's back what you would say to their face. And that's just a model that I've had my entire life. I will only say something behind their back that I wouldn't mind them hearing, or I wouldn't mind saying to their face. So let's talk about church, though, not causing irreparable damage when it comes to which church you attend, leaving a church, etc. Those, I will firmly believe this after this year. Those who seek to cause division and split a church are wicked. And I don't care for what purpose that they're doing it. If they go into an established work, especially one that the pastor has planted himself and spent years and years and years and years of his life toiling away, blood, sweat, and tears, and they go into that established church and they try to cause division and they try to recruit people and they try to get everyone to turn against the pastor, and they try to, especially when it's not over doctrinal issues, and most of it's not, most of it's over petty stuff, personality clashes, that type of thing. Those who seek to cause division and split a church are wicked. And usually there's a few groups of church people in a church. Number one, the gullible who believe every word. Those are the ones who are lapping up the stories that this person, is this person seeking to cause discord is saying. The foolish, and those are the ones who just blindly, follow along with someone. And then the wicked at heart. And I truly believe the ringleaders of whatever's going on, sowing discord, whispering, spreading stories, they are truly wicked. You'll never convince me otherwise. When it comes to church, you need to be invested in something for the long haul. You need to, I think the families that I've seen raise the best children are usually the ones where they raise that child in a church, one church. That child is raised there from the time they were born to the time they get married. They're raised in that same church. And it's just because that often shows a pattern of faithfulness and longevity and sticking to something for a long time. Most people, though, after about 3 years, they grow sick of the church and they move on to greener pastures. But the grass is not greener on the other side of the fence, because people are people and drama is drama. And it's going to be the same wherever you go. You're going to have personality clashes to work through. You're going to have disagreements to work through. You're going to have issues that pop up. But if everything has its place as far as the structure of authority within a church, then, and everyone's doing their part and everyone's just trying to be the best church member that they can be, the pastor included, things will fall right into place. So if you do have to move to a different church, do so quietly and without causing problems. So try to leave on good terms. Sometimes things come up. Your husband has to get a job in a different city, So if that is the case, you definitely don't want to try to bring people with you or drag people along with you or spread gossip or whatever it is. Just try to leave quietly without causing problems and leave on good terms. And then lastly, let's talk about our reputation and ways that it is hard to salvage a reputation. I like that, Chanello. She said the grass is greener where you water it. And yes, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of a drought in whatever church you're in. Sometimes there's going to be a few hard times, but if you stick it out and you keep tending to that grass and putting in the time and putting in the effort and watering it, it will eventually grow again. So no, Chanel, I completely agree. She said, just heard of a couple that got divorced after 25 years of marriage. It had to have been years of stuff. And it is. And this is kind of what I've noticed. Okay. So I'm approaching the 25-year mark. And in my mind, I cannot even fathom just calling it quits after all this. But when you're first married, and the kids start coming, it's kind of an exciting time, right? Like you're in the honeymoon phase and then the kids start coming and you're just so busy. You don't have time to think. Like you're just on autopilot. You're just getting through the day. And so there's not even time to think about like, I don't know, I want to go cheat or something. After 2 decades, you're starting to have adult kids now. And you're looking at your life and you're thinking, this turned out a little differently than I thought or I expected. And because of that, I almost feel like people go through a midlife crisis around this time of life, around my age or closer to 50. It's almost like they go through a midlife crisis and suddenly they're like, you know what? I've only got like 20, 30 years left. This is not the way I imagined it. I don't know if they expected marriage to be like fireworks all the time and like Hollywood describes it, but it's not. No relationship is. There's always stuff to work through. And so they go looking. They go looking for the fireworks and they go looking for the exciting times because it's like they're realizing I don't have much time left and whatever. But for me, like I have the opposite mindset. Life only gets better for me. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, stay with it, stick in there, work on your marriage when you're younger. And when you get to be married, it'll be 20. I don't know. How old is Tommy? I can't even know. It'll be 23 years in April. So we'll be married 23 years in April. When you get to that point, it's so much fun because you can just leave the kids at home and go on a trip, because they're older, or you can have fun together. You can go on dates and you can have hobbies like working out or going kayaking or whatever it is. It just gets better and better. And that's what I've found. So when you make those rash decisions when it comes to marriage or anything, you're really sacrificing a lot. And sometimes there's no coming back from that. There's no coming back from divorce. There's no coming back from adultery. There is, in a sense. But sometimes you've ruined that relationship so much that the other person just gives up. So you always have to take that into consideration when you decide to give in to the sins of the flesh. But our reputation is always something that needs to be guarded. And number one, adultery is hard to get past when it comes to your name. Oftentimes, you'll always be known as an adulterer. Sins of the flesh, and that could include anything that would carry a criminal sentence. If you get a criminal sentence, it's really hard to erase from your record forever. Our records are permanent. And a lot of times when it comes to felonies, that will affect if you can buy a gun legally. It will affect if places will hire you. So there's a lot of things involved when it comes to keeping your reputation and your name clean. Even losing your temper. You can get into a fight and then have charges pressed, and there's all sorts of things. And then even what you write online. Just remember that a screenshot lasts forever. And how do you want people to remember you? I am spunky sometimes, and I will write a spunky post at times. But overall, I want my writing to reflect encouragement rather than reproving. So I want my writing to be remembered as writing that encouraged a young mom, writing that encouraged a young wife. There's a time and a place for a rebuke as well, but I don't want that to be my overall tone, if that makes sense. So that really forms a lot of how people think about you. How is your spirit online? How, is your demeanor online? I've often said I like social media for the fact that it shows what's in everyone's hearts. And it really does, especially if that person's stupid and they're just blabbering all over the internet. So I've often liked it because of that, but that's a warning to us too, that we need to be careful when it comes to what we write, what we put online, etc. So at the end of the day, it's hard to be faithful for years in and years out, but being faithful is what earns the greatest rewards. And that's in anything, being faithful in your walk with the Lord, being faithful and not giving into the sins of the flesh, being faithful in your marriage, being faithful in your church, being faithful in raising your children. It all comes down to faithfulness, and it takes work. It takes work to be faithful during the dry times and during the high times and during the low times and during the good times and the bad times. It takes work and it takes faithfulness. But when you get older, you're going to enjoy the blessings that come from that. And I think, looking back, the only regrets that I haven't had many regrets in my life. I've really enjoyed my life, and I feel like I do have God's blessings on my life. I wish maybe more problems could have been solved one-on-one before they escalated. But even that, when I'm talking about relationships with others, even that, sometimes if people won't share with you what's going on and it escalates, there's nothing much you can do about it. You can't just go off of a feeling or a vibe that you get. You have to wait for that person to approach you. So, usually problems in church have been building for a year or two. They don't just happen. They've been building, and it's usually because of small grievances that were never dealt with. They were never addressed, and they just build into big grievances. So, and I think that's true with all relationships, even with our kids. Small grievances just build through the years. And then by the time they're 16, 17, 18, they become bitter about it and they just walk away from it all. So let's try to prevent that from happening by dealing with these things when they're small, rather than getting big and then not having a remedy, because I hate seeing that. And sometimes I just have to tell people when I get emails, I'm sorry, I wish I could give you good advice, but I really can't in this situation. This is what I would do, but sometimes there's not a good solution, and sometimes there's not a good answer for years and years and years of problems. So if you do have problems, speak with a trusted friend or counselor, ask for prayer, try to get it, taken care of and address it. And then hopefully, you can nip it in the bud before it becomes a big issue. So all right, next week, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to do it on Monday. Monday's Christmas. I'm not going to do it on Monday. So if I do it at all, it will be on Tuesday, December 26th. So I might do it December 26th, or I might just cancel the week altogether. I don't know yet. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and get all of the last minute things done. Don't go crazy. Don't stress yourself out. Try to enjoy it this week. As hard as that can be, try to enjoy it. And I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. I'm very thankful for all of you. Thank you for joining me. I'm very thankful for the listeners that I have, and I'm thankful for your support, and you mean a lot to me. So I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and we will see you in the next week.